We'd been married for 36 years when Harold was suddenly diagnosed with Alzheimer's. But somehow his memory loss seemed to spare everything, except me. Still, I stayed by his side without a word of complaint, caring for him as though nothing had changed. Until today. I overheard him on the phone with an old friend, purely by chance. "You're acting like a stubborn 3-year-old. How does she even put up with you?" Harold's voice was flat, emotionless. "I'm just trying to push her to say it first, to ask for a divorce. Come on, you know Vivian's been struggling on her own all these years, raising kids, moving from place to place. I can't keep her waiting anymore." So that was it. The disease, this whole performance, was just a cover. An excuse to reunite with his old flame. I looked down at the bowl of noodles he'd deliberately spilled, the one I had cooked again and again without complaint. A bitter smile tugged at the corner of my lips. "Fine. If that's what you want, then let's end this." By the 13th time I wiped the grease from the corner of Harold's mouth and lifted the spoon to feed him again, my arms had already started to ache. I picked up a small bite of vegetables, coaxing him softly, "Come on, sweetheart. Just a little bit of veggies, okay?" But Harold turned his head away abruptly like a sulking child and shouted, "No. I'm not eating that." Before I could respond, he jumped to his feet and swung his arm out in frustration. Plates and bowls crashed onto the floor, shattering in all directions. The hot soup splashed onto my feet, sending a sharp sting up my leg and forcing a hiss through my teeth. He froze. There was a flicker of confusion in his eyes, as if somewhere deep down he realized he'd done something wrong. He hesitated, starting to step forward. I bit back the pain and quickly stopped him. "Don't move. Stay right there, the shards could cut you." With the way his mind works now, if he stepped into that mess he could seriously hurt himself. This was my husband, Harold Blake. Once a self-made titan, a force in the investment world, a man who had clawed his way to the top through sheer willpower and brilliance. But a year ago he was diagnosed with Alzheimer's. This disease, so silent and relentless, chips away at everything. Memories, emotions, the ability to control even the simplest actions. But the cruelest part? The first person Harold forgot was me. Harold had stopped lashing out. He just sat there now, his eyes wide and innocent, looking at me as if nothing had happened, like the outburst, the shattered dishes, the scalding soup. None of it had ever occurred. The ache in my chest tightened. Tears threatened to spill, but I swallowed them down, refusing to let them fall. Ignoring the burn on my foot, I guided him gently to the couch and turned on a cartoon to keep him occupied. He sat quietly, eyes fixed on the screen like a child, while I limped off to fetch the broom and dustpan. I knelt down and began sweeping the broken pieces from the floor, each clink of porcelain echoing a kind of quiet grief. Only when I turned on the faucet and let cold water run over my foot did the burning ease slightly. But in that moment another sting rose, one I couldn't wash away. I remembered that morning. The morning I woke up and found Harold staring at me with eyes colder than I'd ever seen. Eyes that didn't recognize me. "Who are you?" he asked, voice sharp and unfamiliar. "What are you doing in my house?" My heart sank. I picked up the phone and immediately called Caleb. The moment our son walked through the door, Harold's face softened. A smile broke across his lips. "Hey buddy. You're home." Caleb looked at me puzzled. He hadn't yet grasped what was happening. Then Harold turned to him and asked, "Who is this woman? Why is she in my house?" That's when we knew something was deeply wrong. Caleb rushed us to the hospital. Dr. Alan Fisher was the one who read Harold's test results. He'd known us for decades. Back when we all still lived in that small town, back when life was simpler and futures felt wide open. "Mrs. Blake." His expression was heavy as he reviewed the scans. "It's okay, Alan," I said before he could go on. "Tell me the truth. I can take it." I hadn't been to college, didn't know all the medical jargon. But I remembered when I was a child, an old man in town suddenly forgot everyone around him. People said it was cancer. He'd had a large lump on his head before he passed. That word haunted me. "As long as he's still alive," I told Dr. Fisher, "I'll take whatever it is." He gave me a gentle smile. "It's not cancer, Jade. Don't worry. But it's something else. Harold has Alzheimer's, a degenerative neurological disorder." I stood there numb. But why would he forget me? Dr. Fisher sighed. "With Alzheimer's, memories don't fade in order. Sometimes the first person a patient forgets is the one they were closest to. The first one he forgot was you, which also means in a way you were the one he loved the most. The one he depended on most. I couldn't bring myself to smile. Not then. Not even now. But those words, the first person he forgot was the one he loved most, became the only excuse I had left to comfort myself in the long days that followed. Every time Harold turned those unfamiliar, piercing eyes on me, eyes that scanned me like I was some kind of intruder, and demanded over and over again, "Who are you? Why are you in my house?" Sometimes even shoving me roughly toward the door. I'd silently repeat Dr. Allen's words in my mind, clinging to them like a lifeline. The first person he forgot was you because you were the one he held dearest. I told myself this was what love meant, standing by someone when everything else falls apart. I couldn't give up on him. I couldn't let him get lost in his past alone. The burn on my foot had dulled to a throb by now. I turned off the faucet, washed my hands and leaned against the sink trying to gather myself. And that's when I felt it, that prickling heat of someone staring at me, sharp and insistent like a needle pressed to my back. I looked up at the mirror. Harold was standing in the doorway. In his 60s now, but still looking like a man in his prime. Thick dark hair, sharp features that still held traces of the handsome face I once fell in love with. He leaned against the doorframe, silent, watching me with wide, clear eyes, the innocent gaze of a child. I exhaled slowly, relieved for a moment. Maybe he was calm again. I started to speak, my voice gentle. "Are you still hungry? I can make you some tomato and egg noodles if you want." But the moment shattered in an instant. His whole demeanor shifted. His voice snapped into something urgent, suspicious. "Who are you? How did you get in here? Are you trying to rob me? Get out. Right now. Or I'm calling security." The floor seemed to drop from beneath me. Before I could even gather my thoughts, Harold lunged forward and shoved me toward the door. His mind might have regressed, but his strength hadn't. I couldn't stop him. I couldn't even slow him down. I didn't even have time to grab my shoes. The door slammed shut behind me. Charleston's winter nights were brutally cold and snow still blanketed the ground in thick layers. My bare feet hit the icy stone path, instantly numb from the cold, the sharp gravel biting into my soles. I rubbed my hands together for warmth, watching each breath curl out in frosty clouds. My phone was still inside the house. I had no choice but to limp toward the community office to get the spare key. Halfway down the path, I spotted the community security patrol heading toward me, a young woman named Ella. The moment she saw me, she stopped in her tracks, eyes wide with understanding. "Mrs. Blake, wait here, I'll grab the spare key for you." She dashed off before I could say a word. Just a few minutes later she came hurrying back, cheeks flushed, carrying a jingling ring of keys, and a pair of thick winter shoes. She gave me an apologetic smile. "Mrs. Blake, if you don't mind, here, wear mine for now. You'll get frostbite out here barefoot." Gratefully I took the shoes and keys, thanking her over and over as we walked back toward the house together. I stood before the front door of our house and knocked firmly. "Harold, open the door." His voice came from inside, low and guarded. "I don't know you. Go away." My tone instinctively sharpened. "I'm your wife. If you don't open this door, I swear I'm going to get really upset." Harold let out a sharp scoff. "Impossible. My wife isn't you." He refused to open the door. There I was, standing outside in the cold with Ella, my face burning with embarrassment as I awkwardly rubbed my hands together to keep warm. Ella sifted through the ring of spare keys, trying one after another, until she finally found the right one. Without hesitation she unlocked the door. The moment it swung open, our eyes met. Harold looked right at me with that same blank, unfamiliar gaze. But he clearly recognized Ella. She stepped forward, speaking firmly like an older sister schooling a stubborn child. "Mr. Blake, a real man doesn't treat a woman this way, right? I'd bet my reputation on it. This woman standing next to me, Mrs. Jade Blake, is your legal wife. You've been married for decades. Don't you remember the 2 drawers under your nightstand? Your marriage certificate's been sitting there all this time. If you don't believe me, go take a look for yourself." Harold shot me a suspicious glance, then turned around and headed to the bedroom. A few minutes later he came back holding a worn marriage certificate in his hand. He stared at the old photo on the document, then looked at me again. His lips curled slightly in reluctant acknowledgement. "Fine. Looks like you really are my wife. Go ahead. Come in." Before Ella handed back the key, she gave him one final look, her voice solemn. "Mr. Blake, a real man doesn't push a woman out into the cold." Harold didn't say a word. He just turned and went back to the living room, tossing the marriage certificate carelessly onto the floor before sinking into the couch to watch his cartoons. I bent down, picked it up, and quietly went back to the bedroom. Sitting on the edge of the bed, I stared at that photo for a long time. It had been taken a few years ago. I was smiling like a fool, not much different from how I looked now. We'd been together for over 30 years and had raised a son, but ironically, it wasn't until 6 years ago that we made it official. I'd brought it up a few times over the years, asking if we could just take a trip down to City Hall. But Harold always had an excuse. Too busy with work, too many meetings, the timing was never right. Whenever I mentioned it again at home, he'd just pull me close and say, "You're already my wife. We don't need some piece of paper to prove it." I used to find that romantic. Eventually, I learned to settle for it. It wasn't until our son got married that we finally walked into City Hall and signed that piece of paper. The title I'd chased half my life, the unnecessary fuss Harold always dismissed, had finally become a name recognized by law. I still remember that day so vividly, standing with Harold at City Hall signing our marriage license. It was a quiet moment, but the joy inside me was overwhelming, almost too much to put into words. And yet now, 36 years into our marriage, Harold has been diagnosed with Alzheimer's. He's forgotten so much, especially everything about me. It's supposed to be him lost in the fog of memory. But sometimes, it feels like I'm the one trapped in a time capsule, watching everything pass me by while standing perfectly still. That evening, Caleb came home for a rare visit, bringing Nina and little Liam with him. Ever since Harold's diagnosis, Caleb has taken over the company, juggling one responsibility after another. The endless stress has started to show. Those once jet black strands in his hair now had a few stubborn threads of gray peeking through. Nina, meanwhile, barely had time to breathe. She spent most of her days chasing after the whirlwind energy of a toddler, with no space left for herself. Knowing how exhausting life had been for them, I'd spent the entire morning cooking up a full table of dishes, hoping to give them a taste of home and a bit of comfort. When we all finally sat down to eat, Harold pulled his chair closer to Caleb, so close in fact it felt deliberate. A small gesture, but it spoke volumes. The distance, the wariness. It was as if I were just another stranger at the table.